So please welcome Ross alum, class of 2003, and performance artist and slam poet, Andrina Smith.
This is so weird. I went to Ross, and now I'm here looking at you guys like I'm a person. Okay. I completely agree with you, Bill Thompson. I creo que es una cosa muy importante aprendiendo otros idiomas. Thanks, Veronica Filippi, she taught me that. But don't let my trendy poet hat fool you. I'm a nerd. I really like words. I like learning. I grew up out on the East End. I went to Our Lady of the Hamptons, and then before that came, after that came to Ross. And it was cool being able to come to a school that really allowed me the opportunity to artistically express myself with whatever I did. Like, I'd be like, oh, guys, I want to write this like one-woman show about teenage runaways. They're like, sure. I'm like, I want to write this poem about like decapitating my estranged dad. And they're like, great. And I'm like, cool. So didn't really teach me censorship. After Ross, I went to Emerson College as a musical theater major. And the first 2 years, they were very like, jazz hands, and I wasn't, and it didn't work out that well. I went to then the Czech Republic for about 7 months and did a study abroad studying the arts and social change. And those are two things that I love. I'm like, ooh, art, social change, great. And it's a country that was formed in 1989. And the first president of the Czech Republic was a playwright. And I'm like, what? That's crazy, I'm a playwright. And it influenced me a lot. What got me into spoken word was, like all things, a boy. It started with a boy. He was in my improv class, and I see this kid, and he's just like little, scrawny, Jewish kid who has like these Timbs and like khakis and comes in, and I'm a senior in this improv class, and he's a freshman, but he's taken some time off because he did all this like spoken poetry, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm hot stuff. I'm a senior, been acting for years, and we do this scene where we have to like say, anyway, I'm talking too much. Anyway, we do this scene, and I find out he's really talented and really skilled, and so I start talking to him more, and he's been on like HBO, Def Poetry Jam, doing all this stuff, and I hear him perform, and I'm like, wow, I could totally do that. And so from my experiences with him, I got 2 poems, and I'm gonna start with those 2. My poetry revolves around the things that I know, and it's usually identity, race, and love. And so the poems that I'm going to recite for you today will be around those. The first one, it's called Woes of the Enlightened Negro. And it was about what it was like going to private school my entire life and always being another, because I was. And then I'm just gonna go into this series of poems. I'm not gonna stop, because once I start talking, it's kind of hard for me to stop doing that. Woes of the Enlightened Negro. Enter the giant negress from stage left in appropriate dress and articulate tongue to match. It is her strongest accessory. Words congregate in her mouth to form a cacophony of sound that falls short of being melodious. To have melody, you require a sequence, and life is too much of a bitch to give her anything sequential. So she must settle for an almost, but not quite, barely strapping by, just short of just right, a hindrance of sorts, but a comfortable place to exist. Crocodile tears offer her no comfort other than the fact that in an acting class, she can cry on command. She lets out a long moan. Oh, her muscles groan. She's got the weight of the world on her shoulders, bracing herself for a fall. When will she fall? Will she fall? It's an answer only time is capable of providing. Thank you. The second poem was about the same boy, because after starting to see how cool he was, of course, I had a crush on him. And so I wrote this poem entitled You're not vain, so you probably don't think this poem is about you, but it is. I want to write a poem for you, but I'm slightly inebriated, and eloquence in this state could cause severe hemorrhaging. Hemorrhage, that's a strange word, hemorrhage. I wonder what it's the Latin derivative of. I wonder that because wondering that keeps me from lingering on the fact that this poem began its verse with, I want to write a poem for you. I want to paint a Sistine Chapel of prose and use garish metaphors that ooze from my nose and pores and skin and slides down to my toes, drip, 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 there that stuff goes until there's nothing left. I want you to see me, but I'm too afraid to be me. I'd much rather continue this lonely and very dangerous journey that's got me going on a windy road to a dead end. I'm the master of disaster when it comes to suppression. We both feel it, no, we got this enlightened connection, but before I can even allow the question to arise, I swallow it and lose a bit of myself each time I do. I wanna look you in the eyes and see cliche stuff like sunrise instead of a feeling that will die because I won't try. It's the same tune, only this time the reprise sounding a little something like never gonna get it, because I can't and I won't and I don't. And I'm scared and unprepared of having to bear any vulnerability. I want to leave traces and clues so that you know that it's you, but I'm so scared for you to know the truth, although I'm pretty sure you figured it out. And when you look at me and see that glimmer in my eyes reserved for just you and no one else, smile, but shh, don't say anything, because I'm fragile. And though it might not seem so, I shatter at the slightest touch. Thanks. This next poem, I substitute teach in the Southampton School District. And this poem was one that I wrote for Black History Month because I was getting a little heated that there was like nothing for Black History Month. And I'm like, that's dumb. I'm gonna write a poem about that. So I do a lot. When I'm like, oh, I'm angry, I'm gonna write a poem. So I wrote a poem about it, and it's called Black History Month. Black history is consolidated into a month. 1 month where we're supposed to reflect. Reflect on the burden of a people that were burdened with the bricks of building a nation. Reflect on that whole slavery situation. A time where we rewind and turn back the hands of time to see Martin's had dreamed, Malcolm's X, and Rose's victory. Time for middle school kids to write down in verse the ways they could be like MLK. Time for elementary school kids to proudly say, I would sit next to anybody on the bus, no matter what their skin color. Reflect on the words of Malcolm X. Actually, wait, Malcolm was too radical. See, the history that we received was whitewashed, and I'm not talking racially description washed, I'm talking nose stinging, ears ringing, call poison control if digested wash, because our history books take rich color and culture and depth and texture and bleach it. Bleach it until it's too foreign to reach it, too hackneyed to preach it, too dull for our speech, bleached, until it's boring enough for teachers to teach. Which is why Black History Month gets repeatedly thrown aside. Black students indifferent to exhibiting pride, and white students feeling like they're on the oppressor side, and red, yellow, and brown kids have been misguided into thinking that this doesn't pertain to them, and all students thinking that this is a game. This is not a game. Our freedom came at a price, the price of our hopes and our fears, of our blood, sweat, and tears, of unspoken years where our rivers contain more blood than water. This month is set aside so we can remember. Remember that unless you're an Indian, you're an immigrant. Choose to remember instead of try to forget that this country has a stolen and unpaid debt from its people. Because if you really want to learn about history, let's go back to the 1600s and see that indentured servants were really just white slaves who could get set free. 70% of imported whites were from this class, and the rich fat cats started to feel like asses as they saw the cash cow of slavery slip through their grasp. So they came up with a plan, the high-ups in the slave trade, and made the moves that had to be made to keep poor whites and blacks from mingling. Here's a piece of land, they said. You're an American, pure and bred, and blacks, unless slaves, are better off dead. Thought after thought poured into white heads until they thought those thoughts were original. And today, history books continue the trend, taking our stories and making them bend and twist so they can achieve their own ends. So learn enough to question the things your teachers tell you. But don't swear off their allegiance, because sometimes teachers can't teach it if it's not going to be featured on the Regents. And I'm not trying to get pedantic or frantic over the semantics. I'm just saying it's important you know the truth. Let history serve to remind us that the past that's behind us will be a part of our future if we let it. No longer are we allowed to forget it, regret it, or try to omit it, because now is the time we have to stand together and sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. We're facing a rising sun, a new day has begun, and I'm standing here letting you know that you are the ones to rearrange a systematic institution and implement a change that is long overdue. And this is the last poem I'm gonna read today. I love Dr. Seuss. He's my fave. If I could just read Dr. Seuss all the time, my life would be great. And I am a mixed blood native. I am Shinnecock and I am African American. And the last poem that I'm going to read talks about that kind of mixed blood heritage. And it's a really big point of contention in Native American communities because, oh, my native blood is this strong, my native blood is this strong, how native is your native, and it's this whole thing. So, of course, wrote a poem about it. And it is entitled, One Indian, Two Indian, Red Indian, Blue Indian. See the Dr. Seuss connection there? And I was talking to Bill O'Hearn about it before because it has curses in it. And I'm like, Bill O'Hearn, is this okay? And he's like, yeah, sure, it's your art. So, sorry, there are 3 in it, but that's okay. You guys are like high schoolers, you know what curses are. Okay, so 1 Indian, 2 Indian, Red Indian, Blue Indian. Oh, she thinks she's native or something. Yeah. Or something, because sometimes something is all you can muster to be, some disproportioned mudblood anomaly that is Indian by name and not face. I'm a black native, and isn't that ironic? Who knew identity could be oxymoronic? Honey, don't try and pose as anything exotic, cause leaky old faucets drip 1-drop rules that label your water toxic, and your Shinnecock blood is the crack of narcotics, a dirty wannabe without the purity of its still cut up brethren cocaine, because all native blood ain't processed the same, and all native blood ain't taken the same. Yo-yo-hee, trails of tears blanket danced down her 9-year-old face as she learned early on that history held no place for people like her, for people like hers. The first time she got called a nigger was by a native. Stoic eyes discriminate louder than any pro-Jim Crow picket signs, and fucking a nigger is a punishable crime because diluted blood makes it harder to place when sovereign nations compete in a white man's foot race. Wampishau slave trades implemented racist ideals. For 100+ oppressed years with xenophobic attempts to conceal the fact that we never had a segregated medicine wheel. And when slavery went bankrupt, the US never drew up a new deal to tell a nation exactly how much blacks were worth. So reinforced stereotypes trickle down Indian country like honey trickling down fry bread. We swallowed amnesia alongside lies that were spoon-fed, forgetting that in the beginning side by side stood black and red. So we continue to take smallpox blankets with us to bed and wonder why we wake up feeling feverish. I am tired. I'm tired of having to constantly defend a culture that's a birthright and not a new age trend, since apparently a dream catcher makes everyone Indian, or at least have a great-great-grandmother who was a chief's daughter. My ancestors are weeping the salt tears only the people of the shore could create. Shinnecock youth developed chips saltier than Pringles could generate, and I'm feeling so salty, let this be my probate that boldly stands before you and chants not just states, I'm not Indian for you. I'm not your Indian whom you give gifts to and then take away. I'm not your succotash du jour that makes you feel hip today. I'm not your nigger lip darky that makes it easier to say, oh, she thinks she's native.
I'm Indian for the kids who know the smell of beer before they're old enough to spell it. For youth who see women they love beaten but know they can't tell it. For res dirt that knows how to permeate down to your veins. For rawhide regalias and long-winded names that define more than a person but an entire nation. I'm Indian for that 7th generation. That's all I am and all I'll ever be, some disproportioned mud-blood anomaly, but that's okay. They don't determine what I do. Mayana, Gogiski, Nishota, Nishay. I'm doing this, babies, for no one but you. Thank you.